Good Monday, everyone. Today is April 19th. Today is the 246th anniversary of the American War of Independence, by the way. But today we're also taking a break. We're taking a break from the almost week-long reporting of the 9.1 PTR changes. As we went through all of the additions, we went through the balance changes and the balance tuning, the planned changes to talents and spells and abilities, the additions to the new Covenant-flavored legendaries, the supposed score system that is going to be added to Torghast, the new way to upgrade your legendary, the new faction in the new zone, that's advance in Korthia, and all that type of stuff. So what we have today instead is Speculation Monday, a question which will begin rotting in players' minds, creeping in every day as they log into their main character, which is, who am I going to main in 9.1? Who am I going to play? Does my spec look good for 9.1? Am I getting nerfed? Is it time to jump ship? Or should I just reroll to a flavor of the month spec because I'm sick and tired spending tier by tier being avoided like I have the plague? Of course, this is just a preliminary question, just for fun. As the weeks go by, there are going to be more changes, more balance tuning happening, so whatever we say now might be completely different than what is going to happen in a month, but it's always entertaining to speculate about things like these. So we are starting with melee DPS. We start with melee DPS because it's been the role that has been touched the least so far in 9.1, so we have the least amount of wild speculations to make about the entire role. The current situation when it comes to melee DPS, so if you wanted to just copy whatever is happening right now to 9.1, is Fury Warrior, Assassination Rogue, Outlaw Rogue, and Unholy Death Knight. That seems to be the to-go package of melee specs. That's all the pretty decently viable and popular specs for all content. In both Mythic Plus, even at keys higher than 20, they are all above 10% representation, 15% and more even for Fury. And when it comes to raid encounters, Assassination, Unholy, Outlaw and Fury are all the better performing ones. Even Windwalker, I should add. After their bug fix, they have kind of picked back up their performance. They are there as well. So is there any risky pick, any niche pick you would want to do for 9.1? Well, not really so far. The thing about melee DPS is that they are the more volatile of the roles because they are less played and less playable than range DPS in raids, which means you have less room for exotic picks. And even worse, in Legion and BFA, melee DPS were more popular in Mythic Plus, but in Shadowlands they are not. In Shadowlands you have one spot for melee DPS in Mythic Plus groups, for most Mythic Plus groups, which makes it even more strict, the pick you want to go for as a melee DPS. So the risk of going for something like a Retribution Paladin, an Enhancement Shaman, a Feral Druid, it becomes bigger and bigger because you just have less wiggle room. If you're a range DPS, wanting to pick Elemental, or Shadow Priest, or Balance Druid, it is much more likely that you can make it in, even if you are less viable than other specs. But for melee, it's much trickier. It's much harder to have these type of variations in your picks. So there needs to be some very clear hint, some very clear changes coming in 9.1 for you to move away from the current meta of melee specs. Fury Warrior, to me, seems the safest one. Unholy Death Knight has already been nerfed quite a few times. They have been sort of held down after the first couple of months of Shadowlands where they received multiple nerfs. Fury Warrior, on the other hand, has gotten buffed multiple times. They have started scaling pretty heavily. Let's just remember, everyone, the evergreen meme to not worry when warriors suck because they scale. So eventually they won't suck anymore. That's exactly what happened to Fury Warrior. And as the expansion goes by, as they get more and more effects, borrowed powers, extra things to scale their spec, they are going to function very well. They're going to scale stronger than an Unholy Death Knight, significantly more than a Windwalker Monk, than a Havoc Demon Hunter, than an Outlaw Rogue. In MOBA terms, it's as if a late game scaling comp is even in gold to an early game cheese comp 15 minutes into the game. It's over, you won. You went past the first hard hurdle, which was scaling in the early game of the expansion where you were shit and lumbering, moving slowly, getting left behind, and now that you're starting to roll, now that you're starting to roar your engine and go forward, you're looking just fine as a Fury Warrior. The only exception that popped up recently for the melee picks is Assassination. Assassination is very volatile because their Mythic Plus performance is still very poor compared to Outlaw. As a matter of fact, they are still non-existent in Mythic Plus. They are still lower than Retribution Paladin in Mythic Plus. They are lower than Enhancement Shaman. They are even losing right now to Frost Decay. You know, they're just not on the map when it comes to Mythic Plus. So rolling to Assassination basically condemns you to just being a raid bot. You're not really going to be able to have much of any, I don't know, enjoyment even in Mythic Plus. Of course, you are blessed by being a pure DPS class, which means you can just respec to Outlaw whenever you want to do Mythic Plus. The only negative, of course, is that Outlaw and Assassination do not share covenants. So you will have to take the hit. You know, identify which is the content you want to push more towards, either Mythic Plus or raids, and then just take the correct covenant and be a little bit less effective in the other type of game activity. As for the other picks, I wouldn't be so sure coming into 9.1. I don't think Havoc and Windwalker and Enhancement and Ret and even Unholy are going to continue doing as well. I don't have many hopes for Windwalker because of their horrible lack of scaling. I don't have any hopes for Havoc Demon Hunter because they have gotten buffed already and they don't scale particularly well. I pointed this out before. Havoc has traditionally been bailed out late game by Borrowed Powers. So Blizzard, Papa Blizzard, coming in to save their favorite spec at the last moment. Otherwise, in their kit, in their passives, in their mastery, they don't scale well. They need some extra help. Retribution Paladin, I also have zero hopes, although they do scale pretty well. They are pretty fine later into the expansion. The problem is, unfortunately, they are in a similar situation to Protection Paladin, which is that they don't bring anything to the raid. So just like Protection Paladins get benched because they don't give anything as a tank to the raid, Retribution Paladin is just about the same in raid encounters, and same can be said for Mythic Plus. Unfortunately for Retribution Paladin, they also have a kind of similar damage profile to Outlaw Rogue, except that Outlaw Rogues outperforms them, so that's kind of unlucky. But that's what I would go for if I were looking at re-rolling and rolling a spec to play for 9.1 when it comes to melee DPS, Fury Warrior and Rogue as a whole. Those seem to be the two safest choices. Now, what about range DPS? Because range DPS is the role which has received the most changes in 9.1. Basically, the first batch of changes of balance tuning for 9.1 was around range DPS actually, because we have gotten a nerf to Shadow Priest, we have gotten a bigger nerf to Affliction, we have gotten an even bigger nerf to Fire Mage, and we have gotten a cataclysmic nerf to Balance Druid. So the only two classes that were left alive were Elemental, right after they got buffed, and Marksmanship. Probably because Blizzard had pity for them. After their Wild Spirit bug fix, they said, okay, fine, I can see the state you're in, I don't want to twist the knife. So the current issue for Fire Mages is that it's all over and they want to reroll to Frost. The issue for Affliction Warlocks is that all hope is lost and we are all fleeing to destruction. And then the status of Balanced Druids is that they are painting themselves from orange to blue and turning into Elemental Shamans. Most of the initial nerfs from 9.1 were very heavy. I think the ones to Affliction were warranted. Brain Dead, 3-button spec, almost zero management. Once you have your dots out, you just click Malefic Rapture. It was very disappointing as a build and way too effective for everything. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 targets or 1 did not matter. As long as you spread your dots, you're done. They should probably buff the dots a little bit more after nerfing Malefic Rapture that much. But the real changes were to Fire and Balance. Those nerfs are big enough that I'm expecting the changes to be tuned down a little bit in some of these changes, particularly the Stellar Drift for Balanced Druid, because it's basically an AoE talent, which is a DPS loss to use in AoE. That's how counterintuitive it is right now. So if we were to choose the 9.1 spec looking at this right now, then Balanced Druid is dead, Fire Mage is going to get replaced by Frost, and Affliction is going to get replaced by Destruction. That's what it would be right now. Is it going to stay like this until the end of the PTR into the actual patch? No, it's going to get changed. So it is pretty risky to make any decisive choices right now. But, you know, that's kind of the risk when you want to reroll. That's kind of the risk because you never know when Blizzard is going to stop making changes. If you did the same thing in the beta before Shadowlands, you would be in the same situation. You would be in a situation where a few weeks, just a few weeks, a couple of weeks before the expansion, you thought Subtlety and Frost Mage and Frost Decay were the strongest. And then all of a sudden, Frost Mage gets gutted, Subtlety gets gutted, Fire Mage gets buffed by a lot, and suddenly Fire Mage is the strongest spec. If you waited that long, would you have had the time to level a new character? In BFA, Probably, because that's all you have to do. As the expansion launches, all the previous things from BFA disappear, don't matter anymore, so it's a blank slate going forward. But now, it's not like that. You need Renown to 40, you need to finish your campaign to start the continuous campaign of 9.1, you need your legendaries crafted at rank 4, so you can upgrade them. All things that you don't have right now on whichever character you have to choose to play. So it's not that you can wait 1 week before 9.1 just to make sure that you're picking the right spec. You can say 2, 3, 4 days before 9.1, okay, the Sims are out, Math has spoken, Demonology is the strongest spec, followed by Arcane. That's too late, right? It's too late, you have to start earlier than that. That being said, right now is still pretty far back. We are still at a chill, relaxed time where we can make laid-back speculation about the specs, whether or not they become powerful or not, or nerfed or not, with ease. And it's going to be for the next few weeks as well. Assuming, of course, 9.1 is not going to be out for at least 2 months. Right now, we are still in a pretty safe comfort zone for you to start thinking and looking at the specs. You don't have any haste. There is no hurry in choosing a spec now. You can just observe and watch as the balancing develops. But eventually you will have to make a choice. You will have to roll the dice and hope that you pick correctly. Now, talking about rolling the dice, talking about picking correctly, the tank one is going to look like a little bit more straightforward. Well, I think that for tanks, it's sort of the case of time to stop believing. How many times up to now has Vengeance Demon Hunter been nerfed? They have been nerfed in their conduits, they have been nerfed in the soulbinds, which directly affected Vengeance, they have been nerfed into their abilities directly, and then they have been bug fixed to take even more magical damage than they did before, and then they got buffed by 5% in physical damage reduction, except all the other tanks were buffed by 10%. None of this seemed to have shaken the meta. None of this seemed to have shaken the priorities of specs in tanking role. Now, the question mark could be said that all of these changes came pretty late into the tier. They came, 2, 3, 4 months in. So many of the top players, many of the highest rated players, both rating and Mythic Plus, were already basically at the end of the content for the tier. They were already clearing the raid, farming the raid. They were already in a very solid group for their Mythic Plus runs. They didn't really feel like re-rolling just because of those changes to Vengeance Demon Hunter. But now, with 9.1 coming in, there is going to be more room to reroll. There is going to be more room to respec. With the PTR coming live, maybe let's just say it's going to take at least 2 months for the patch to go live. So in these 2 months, people will start questioning their choice. They will start questioning if it's right or not. And when it comes to tanks, Vengeance seem pretty safe, pretty comfy. But this is just a cop-out answer, right? Making a video just to tell you in 9.1 to play Vengeance. Yeah, duh, what a surprise. So what about the other tanks? Now, of course, it's difficult to give you an answer when Vengeance Demon Hunter is played more than all of the other 5 tank specs combined, right? It's a little bit awkward to try to push you into playing anything else other than Vengeance. When it comes to raids, the problem is still the same. The problem in raiding is that tanks are the leftover role. Tanks are the role where you stuff the buffs you are missing from the rest of the raid. So if Windwalker Monk is not popular, if Mistweaver Monk is not popular, you need the Mystic Touch Monk debuff on your enemies, which means you're going to have to use a Brewmaster Monk. And then if Havoc Demon Hunter is not very popular, it means you need a Vengeance Demon Hunter to give the magical damage debuff to the enemies, so Vengeance Demon Hunter gets a slot. What is Protection Paladin bringing to the raid? What is Guardian Druid bringing to the raid? Of course, their chances are much smaller, and this don't seem to be changing in 9.1. There doesn't seem to be anything pointing towards these 2 specs gaining something that makes them more worthwhile in a raid environment, which means you should not really be hopeful about these 2 specs becoming very popular. Of course, they could become very popular by proxy. If Mistweaver Monk, I know, just follow me for a second. If Mistweaver Monk becomes very popular and one of the best healers, and Havoc Demon Hunter becomes the #1 pick for melee DPS, then you have much less reasons to bring a Brewmaster, much less reasons to bring a Vengeance. So maybe it could open up for a Prot Paladin, it could open up for a Guardian Druid, a Protection Warrior, etc, etc. This seems a very far-fetched idea, particularly because we have no evidence so far, we will get to this, but we have no evidence that something like a Mistweaver Monk is going to raise itself in popularity. So when it comes to tanks in Mythic Plus, it is really difficult to push you towards anything other than Vengeance or also Brewmaster Monk. What I am going to say for the long con players, and also for the hipsters, the one that just feel repulsed at playing a Flavor of the Month spec, the one that just don't want to reroll to a spec that's already popular because they just don't want to be called bandwagoners, you know. There are some people who actually enjoy choosing a hipster spec, hoping that then it becomes popular so they can be satisfied with themselves in having chosen a niche underplayed spec that becomes popular after, so that they can be the one to call everyone else a bandwagoner. Some people are like that, some people enjoy that. So Protection Warrior and Guardian Druid are the two specs for tanks that scale the best. They scale the hardest with gear, with stats, over the course of an expansion, and they are doing pretty fine right now. As I mentioned, I do believe the main issue with both Protection and Guardian is simply that there is no spot for them in raids. Mythic Plus is a different beast. Of course, Mythic Plus functions by different criterias. Not really important what buffs or debuffs your tank is bringing. It's helpful, sure, but it's not really the key of your tank prowess in Mythic Plus. So even though this wasn't supposed to be a cop-out answer, for now, Vengeance Demon Hunter seems to be just the overwhelmingly safest pick for tanks. We have to hope that as the 9.1 PTR continues, there are going to be actual changes being applied to tanks, since we haven't really gotten any so far in 9.1. Now, on to the last role, which is going to be healers. So the TLDR for healers, just getting in front of it immediately, is Restoration Shaman and Holy Paladin are the safest picks. So the reason for that is, of course, that they are the most played in raids and Mythic Plus together. That doesn't seem like a very difficult observation to make. Discipline Priests are also very popular in raid encounters, but there is a significant disparity between the usage, popularity, and strength of a Discipline Priest in Mythic Plus compared to raid encounters, whereas Holy Paladin and Shamans remain consistent in both activities. Similar to tanks, there haven't been many changes for healers so far in 9.1, but there have been a couple. There has been a nerf to Discipline Priest and a buff to Holy Priest. The nerf to Discipline Priest is mostly raid-based, raid-focused. The nerf to the Spirit Shell, going from 60 to 90 seconds. So Spirit Shell continues to be nerfed, whereas Holy Priest has gotten its major cooldown buffed, Symbol of Hope. Symbol of Hope is not only a mana regen tool, now it's going to give you 60 seconds of cooldown reduction on your defensives. Not immunities, so not Aspect of the Turtle, but Exhilaration, not Ice Block, but Mirror Image, but still 60-second cooldown on your defensives. This could prove to be major. Holy Priest was part of the HPS trio. It was part of the group of healers, Holy Priest, Mistweaver Monk, and Restoration Druid, which functioned with very high HPS, very high healing done, but not much else to go with. No damage reduction, no shields, no absorb, no health redistribution, no major cooldowns like Spirit Link, Aura Mastery, or Barrier. And Holy Priest is the first of the three healers left out for many tiers of the meta to have a unique cooldown. Revival for monks is just a big heal. Tranquility for Restoration Druids is just a big heal. Holy Priests now do still have a big heal with their talent, Salvation, Holy War Salvation, but now they also have this, reducing your defensives by 60 seconds. This can become pretty powerful because you can squeeze in, very likely, with most encounters lasting more than 5 minutes, and the harder ones getting closer to 10, you will be able to squeeze in double use of Symbol of Hope during an encounter, which means reducing the cooldown of your defensive by 2 minutes. Most DPS defensives are that long, a couple of minutes. Astral Shift is 90 seconds. I mentioned Mirror Image and Exhilaration, that's both 2 minutes. Most of these type of defensives are between 90 and 120 seconds long, so being able to use double Symbol of Hope in a fight, you get to use that defensive again. And it is very powerful because all of these defensives are all stronger than Barrier. The strength of Barrier of Discipline Priest, for example, is that it's AoE, is that a single player can give everyone damage reduction. But if you have a Holy Priest, which can reduce the cooldown of your personal defensive so that you can use it one more time, personal defensives are going to be in similar value to Barrier. Most of them are going to range between the 20 and the 40% damage reduction, while Barrier is at 25. So, provided Symbol of Hope can give you an extra usage of this defensive and all of the raid can use their defensive thanks to the cooldown reduction of Symbol of Hope, it can actually give you a significant round of extra cooldowns, extra defensive cooldowns you would not have had if you did not have a Holy Priest in the raid. With all the benefits of the extra HPS that a Holy Priest can give you, and to an even smaller degree, the decent benefit of gaining 12% more mana regen on all of your healers, as the cooldown Symbol of Hope still gives you. And then maybe we have some more memery. Maybe we have the memery of bringing double Holy Priest, where they double Symbol of Hope, and every time you use your defensive, double Symbol of Hope is going to bring it off cooldown immediately. So there is quite some cheese, quite some interesting interactions that Holy Priest can bring to a raid, and even to Mythic Plus. Likely less important in Mythic Plus due to only 5 people benefiting from that type of cooldown reduction compared to raids, but still. So the TLDR for healers is likely to just play Restoration Shaman and Holy Priest if you want to be safe, and if you want to be a hipster. If you want the niche pick, you can go Holy. There doesn't seem to be anything too exciting about Restoration Druid and Mistweaver Monk so far, particularly Mistweaver Monk. I hope, honestly, that Mistweaver Monk is going to get some changes in 9.1. They have been rather ignored so far in their state, in the state they are in. They haven't really been touched enough by Blizzard, so I hope they will get something in return in 9.1. For waiting so long, they will be rewarded with some viability in 9.1. So with the healers done, we have covered all the roles. We have the tanks, where so far it's a little bit boring. So far it looks like to be a landslide victory for Vengeance Demon Hunter. If you want to go for the hipster pick, for the niche pick, I would go for Guardian Druid or Protection Warrior right now. When it comes to healers, it's a little bit more open because it's Restoration Shaman and Holy Paladin. And then the alternative I want to be different pick is going to be Holy Priest. When it comes to melee DPS, we do have the safe pick in Fury Warrior, followed by Rogue as a whole. And then you can just move within the Rogue class, Assassination or Outlaw, for both types of content. The more risky pick in the melee category is probably going to be Havoc, and it's very likely going to be the most picked of the risky pick, simply because of how popular Havoc is. There are probably plenty of players hoping that Havoc is going to get bailed out once again by Blizzard. And then for range DPS, it's the more volatile one. It's going to be a case of just how bad the nerfs are for fire and balance, if it's going to be enough to just push the players away from these two specs. If you wanted the hipster pick for range DPS is probably going to be Elemental Shaman. They have been on the rise the past few weeks after the buffs in 9.0.5. They are not at the spot in the expansion yet where their bad scaling, their bad mastery is going to become an issue. So they should have a pretty nice 9.1 patch in terms of performance, at least if this is all Blizzard is going to change for the spec when it comes to tuning. And with this we are done. I would discourage people, as a rule of thumb, to play Survival Hunter. Just, throwing it out there. Just don't. Doesn't matter if it's the flavor of the month spec. People are still not going to flock to the spec anyways. It's just how it is. Similar discussion could be made for Feral Druid, actually. And with this, we are done. We have looked at all the 4 roles and how it is looking in 9.1. We are going to update this and keep track of the possible changes that are going to happen in 9.1 when it comes to tuning, if some of this is going to change heavily. Update this, once we have a clearer picture of how much the nerfs are hitting the specs being nerfed. And then we will see eventually when 9.1 comes out. And thank you guys for watching. If you want to thank me yourself, subscribe to this channel. If you don't want to subscribe, then at least subscribe to Playing a Tank. That would be a good alternative way for you to thank me. See you guys soon, and in the meantime, play a tank, but not a Vengeance. Okay, that was obvious. There is too many of them already.